After spending enough years watching baseball and studying statistics, there are a few sayings that I've grown tired of hearing, since they don't seem to mean anything. One such phrase is manufacturing runs. I've heard it since I first started watching the game, and it seems to have a John Madden feel to its context. It's usually meant to use a non-offensive tactic as a way of increasing run scoring probability for the next hitter in the lineup. I don't have a problem with using stolen bases as a way of advancing into a better scoring position, but sacrificing an out on purpose to advance a runner has recently struck me as a much overvalued tactic. In my first analysis, I created a modifier that used runs scored per out as a method of measuring what an out means to each offense. When you stop looking at an offense in terms of hypothetical potential, it's pretty easy to see just how valuable every out is in determining a team's success. After looking at the ratio, I actually had to find a statistic that measured the potential of an offense. I know I had said that I didn't want to use runs created the first time for that reason. It worked perfectly here since I needed an idea of offensive efficiency in measuring how much an advanced base would help each team. Based on Bill James's technical runs created formula, the aggregate number usually accounts for the maximum number of runs a team can score in a season, assuming a standard luck and opportunity. A percentage of the two creates an offensive efficiency number, the league average being 94.7%. There were actually 3 teams that had greater than 100% for their offensive efficiency: the San Francisco Giants, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Chicago Cubs. There really wasn't any correlation between the ratio and team successes. It just identifies which teams made better use of their opportunities, so the randomness actually fits the model. It wasn't easy finding a proprietary ratio for a value for bases advanced, so I used the 0.52 modifier from the runs created equation for bases advanced. I took the runs per out and plugged it into a 2/3 ratio for each team, where I multiplied 1.25 using the 0.25 modifier from the runs created formula, and the offensive efficiency measure from runs scored out of runs created to give an idea of what each team could do. The average team bunted. Just looking at the overall league average of 0.957 runs per bunt, it would indicate that all sacrifice bunts are worthless, but not every player is the average. I had to isolate sections of the lineup to understand what players meant to offensive production. I only separated the top 6 in sections of 3 from the overall team performance, because below that, the difference between run production seemed to be much less significant, as well as less of a guaranteed significant individual contribution from lower amounts of playing time. I took the runs scored to outs ratio of the top 3 run-producing players on each team. I used the same ratio for the overall value of a sacrifice, but this time the divisor was the subtracted ratio of the 3 players in question, to understand exactly what a bunt would cost a team in run production if it was done by players in that segment of the lineup. I did the same thing for the 4th through 6th rated players on the team. Most teams didn't overuse a sac bunt for their top 3 players, with a few exceptions. The Texas Rangers, the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the Milwaukee Brewers cost themselves several runs by having some of their top players waste out. The Rangers may have been the worst, as their highest run-scoring player, Elvis Andrus, sacrificed 16 times, which cost the team almost 3 runs. Then, I had to actually figure out how much each of these runs cost the team. I used the run differential along with the Pythagorean win-loss theorem to find how many wins a sacrifice added for each team. For this, we need the number of runs allowed in addition to the runs scored, which we already have. The ratio is runs allowed over runs scored squared, add 1 to the result, and then whatever number of games you play in a season over that equation tells you how many wins a team will have. In this case, 162 games for baseball. It's funny how close it comes to accurately predicting a team's win-loss ratio, usually within 4 games for a 162 baseball game season. To understand whether a sacrifice factored into it, I added up all the runs created for each prospective third of the lineup and subtracted the runs from the actual runs scored. I ran it back through the Pythagorean theorem before subtracting the result from the original win projection. As it turned out, only National League teams tended to have any significant bonus trading outs for run potential. The teams with the highest significance were the Cincinnati Reds, the Washington Nationals, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Miami Marlins, the New York Mets, and the Atlanta Braves. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody with a structural deficiency at the bottom of a National League order, with the pitcher having to bat, as opposed to a designated hitter in the American League. I would like to say that one additional win would make the difference, but it's hardly a definitive or significant strategy. I wouldn't even say my analysis is an indictment of the tactic. Certainly teams overuse the sacrifice bunt when the season is viewed as a whole. Outs are so valuable that it becomes a matter of pacing. If a player is performing at a level far enough below the team average compared to the other players in the lineup, it might be viable to trade an out for one base advanced. Or maybe they could just try their luck with the guys they're paying in the first place. Well, as always, guys, you can check out my bi-weekly podcast with my friend Chewy, and you can follow me on Twitter at Steve Casper. I'm Steve, and as Chewy would call it, this might be my Sabrmetric nonsense.